Welcome. We bid you welcome. John Clauser, Johnny Metal, the Metal Dad, with my co-captain, John the Music Nut. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, brother.
Oh,
How
man.
about you?
We're doing good, man. This is I guess we're going to call this the second episode of the five count. I guess is how we're going to look at this since I guess the five count is going to be mostly the wrestling shows is probably how we'll wind up doing this. So
Sounds
if you,
good.
if you all saw last week, we talked about Dark Side of the Ring season 1, the Vice TV channel that just seems to be taking the wrestling fans and everything by storm, and has just really brought some great stories maybe back to life. And maybe that's not a good way of looking at it, but they really uncover some really strong stories here. And so tonight we are going to take a look at season 2. So we're just going to try to kind of this season was had some really, really heavy hitters. You start off with a 2-part episode on Chris Benoit, which the first season was really more Benoit and Eddie Guerrero, their relationship, and then
Yes.
just everything that starts happening in part 2. And then you go from that very heavy story to the life and crimes of New Jack. Oh boy. If for those who don't like a lot of cussing, don't watch that episode. You're gonna need your ears cleaned out after a while, but it was a very entertaining episode. Episode 4, the Brawl for All. Episode 5, Jimmy Snuka and the death of Nancy Argento. So I'm just kind of going down the listing here, and we'll kind of pick one we're going to talk about first. Number 6, assassination of Dino Bravo. Episode 7, David Schultz and the slap heard round the world. Episode 8, cocaine and cowboy boots, the Herb Abrams story. Episode 9, the last ride of the Road Warriors. And the final episode was the final days of Owen Hart. So you've got some major, major heavy stories going on this series. So with that said, I'm going to toss it to John here. And of these episodes, we're just going to probably hit on about 5 of them. Hence the 5 count. Which one do you want to start off with first?
Herb
Put you on the spot.
Abrams.
Herb
Herb
Abrams.
Abrams. Cocaine and cowboy boots. Which also could have been called Dare to Dream. Because Herb Abrams thought he could take over the wrestling world. And he had balls to go and ask Vince McMahon, hey, how about you let me take the East Coast and you take the rest of the states? While Vince McMahon had the WWE at a very strong point at that point. At that point, nobody was close.
Yeah.
AWA was nearly defunct at this point, and WCW NWA at that time, well, for all its star power, they were losing money hand over fist. So Herb Abrams starts the UWF and brings in all of this talent, mostly guys who were in the WWE. Most of the guys had seen their best days, but guys who could still go, like Paul Orndorff, like Bob Orton, like Dr. Death Steve Williams, Brian Bruno Sammartino as a commentator. At this point, Bruno did not like the WWE because of the steroid allegations.
Amongst other things, but yeah.
Amongst other things, correct. So Herb Abrams made his money by opening a bunch of I'm a Big Girl Now stores in New York City, where they made dresses for women who were bigger. And he supposedly did quite well with this and decided he wanted to take on the wrestling world, and he wanted to put the biggest promotion out on earth, even though he had no experience in the industry. He had a lot of great talent there, as I mentioned. Let's not forget about B. Brian Blair, who is so great on these episodes.
Yes, he
And
was.
you'll see him throughout the Dark Side of Ring. Just listen to him in an interview. Wow, what a smart man. I mean, and he was a great worker too. But this was very well done. You had the guys who he was pushing. You had Wild Thing Stevie Ray on here. You had Sunny Beach on here. You had the Colonel, who was the manager, on here. They had stories for days about what Herb Abrams was doing or what Herb Abrams was selling. Let's just put it that way. They let the wrestlers kind of do their own thing, which the wrestlers like, because if you work for a major federation, you are listening to the boss. This federation was a little ahead of its time in the fact that Herb Abrams made himself to be a big part of the storylines before Vince was doing it in WWE and Eric Bischoff was doing it in WCW. So they were ahead of their time in that aspect. They were really putting a lot of money into merchandising and marketing. But they, because of the lack of experience at the top, he didn't have a Dusty Rhodes there, who Dusty Rhodes was a magnificent about planning out matches and knowing who would match up best and storylines and things like that, or a Pat Patterson, guys like that. Because of that, it faltered. He also was talking a lot about out of his ass. Oh, Mick Foley. Mick Foley was on here, and he did a fantastic job too.
Oh yeah.
Throughout the series, again, Mick Foley. You can listen to him talk wrestling all day. Heck, you can listen to him talk music all day. Guy's so versatile. Anyway, but he dared to dream, but he didn't really do his homework. And he loved his Coke. And there's a lot involved here with
and we ain't talking about Coca-Cola, folks.
No, sir, we are not. And but boy, oh yes, but he dared to dream. He got himself involved in the storylines. He had a lot of talent. He also was a big bullshitter. Oh yeah, we got Bruiser Brody. Bruiser Brody was already
dead. No disrespect to Bruiser's family, but he was already passed
I
away.
think he said he was bringing in Blackjack Mulligan as a writer or something, and he was in prison at
prison.
that point. He brought in Andre the Giant. I mean, a coup to him for bringing Andre the Giant and saying, we got him to a long-term contract now for one night, and then Vince showed him the money, and he came right back, even though, and he wasn't in good health at that point. He could barely walk, but hey, he's Andre the Giant. But this is a case of daring to dream. He put on a pay-per-view. He did not know anything about logistics. He put it in a city which was 1 hour from the nearest major city. So they weren't going to find Palmetto, Florida. A lot of people wouldn't have heard of Palmetto, Florida, even though WWE had done TV tapings there, I believe. Yeah. He had big ideas that weren't thought out, and we lost him too soon. And he bounced before we lost him too soon. He bounced a lot of checks, and he almost got thrown off of buildings and things like that. But this was an interesting episode to watch, because I didn't know about Herb Abrams, but I did see a UWF card because I took my brother to a UWF card on his 12th birthday. I was 19 at that point. Just to show you their lack of not really doing their homework with marketing. The show was at the Kingston Armory, which was a couple miles from where we grew up. And that place had the worst acoustics, but it could hold 5,500 people. How do I know? Because I was there when they brought in 5,500 people to see Bon Jovi and Cinderella a few years earlier, when they were at their peaks.
Right.
When they were number 1 and number 3 on the Billboard charts with their respective albums, Slippery When Wet and Night Songs. They had 200 people there for this UWF show, which was the main event, was Nikita Koloff against Ivan Koloff. They had Ken Patera against Bob Orton. They had, I don't remember, I wish I had the program, but B. Brian Blair was there. Mondo Clean, who later became Damien Demento, was there. Taz was there, but he was Tasmaniac then. Tom Brandy was there before he was Salvatore Sincere. You
Hmm.
got to meet a lot of wrestlers. You didn't have to pay anything. I
Wow.
always say Ivan Cole. My brother and I always say Ivan Koloff was so cool. He was the heel, but
Yeah.
he wasn't that much taller than me, but wide. Not an ounce of fat on him, but cool as sin. You know, it was
Hmm.
awesome. But yeah, they only had 200 people in this venue. I mean, who
Why?
he obviously wasn't a great promoter. He might have been a good talker, but they that show was a fun show, but I'm sure it didn't make any money, but
Hmm.
very sure. But yeah, but I mean, Dare to Dream. He had a lot of money and he went for it, but and he had a lot of talent. Where I think Mick Foley might have even said we had more talent. We may have had more talent at WWE at that point, and it's arguable. You definitely could say that.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But yeah, great story though. Very
Yeah.
well done episode, and everyone did a great job.
The one thing about that episode that really struck me was the guys that were really loyal to him. Like the one guy, I think his name was Lenny, that was like his best friend. He
Yes, who worked for
um
NBC?
worked
Lenny
for
DJ.
NBC, right?
Yes,
So I mean, you could tell that he would have bent over backwards and licked his belly button if he could have,
yes,
and for this guy, because that's just the kind of friendship he had with him. But then the other one that really struck me was Stevie Ray, and
yes,
he's like, he believed in me,
yeah.
and nobody else really believed in him. I guess that's probably why he didn't have much of a wrestling career. Other than that, you know, Herb believed in Stevie Ray and gave him that chance to perform. And so kudos to Herb for that. That was that was very poignant. But
Certainly.
yeah, he I don't know how much of all those stories were totally true, but boy, that's a lot of cocaine and hookers.
Oh my
Yikes.
gosh.
Woo! That was another one I think I needed to wash my eyes out with soap after a while, after I was done.
Yeah, he didn't live a long life, but he had a
No,
lot of fun.
he certainly
Oh
had some
gosh.
he certainly had some fun with life, but whoo, well, all right. So now the one I'm going to throw out a little bit that I'll talk about. Last Ride of the Road Warriors. So I always love the Road Warriors. Wow. And you gotta love that. I mean, anytime Hawk just did that, and the water rush. I mean, big pop. You
Oh
just
my gosh,
always
yeah.
were gonna pop when you hear that. Again, these guys were like the special attractions because these both were just big behemoth guys who were just out to just to hurt people. They were so they would do their thing in all the territories, and then they would but that was like the special attraction because that's just how good they were. That's just how good their chemistry was. There really was no other tag team like those two.
Nope.
But you listen to their story of how they grew up in the mean streets of Minneapolis. I would never have thought there was mean streets in Minneapolis, but I guess there is. But a very dark, side of town with all these big clubs with the bouncers and there, all this kind of, really seedy type of stuff going on here. But again, you get Scott Norton, who was great with what he brought in. They mentioned Rick Rude's name. Of course, you got to have Precious Paul in this. You can't tell the Road Warrior story without Paul Ellering. You
No
you
doubt.
you got to have him in there. Of course, Hawk or Animal was still with us yet at this point. He passed away not much longer after that episode aired, if my memory serves me correctly.
Correct. Yes.
So, but here again, these guys were just a great team, often duplicated and never imitated. You just couldn't do another Road Warriors, no matter how much you tried. Powers of Pain tried, Demolition tried, the Dingo Warrior and Sting.
Yeah.
When they were there, that thing, Ultimate Warrior and Sting. So you had a lot of these big muscle guys teams, but man, nothing beats the Road Warriors. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And again, Paul Ellering probably could have stories to tell until the cows came home. And I think some of the stories he would tell were very, very poignant. Yes, unfortunately, the dark side of their story comes in because Hawk was just very much into his painkillers and into his drugs and stuff of that nature. And it just you could see it at that SummerSlam match. It was, and I probably saw it even earlier than that because I actually had the chance to meet them at, this was back in 1988. It was a WCW show, and
Oh,
it was like a Great American Bash kind of tour thing for the summer. And if you bought like a ticket in like the first couple rows, you got to go backstage for a pre autograph thing or whatever. So there's all these people, and you got I mean, Dr. Death came in there. I seem to remember seeing Sting. I think the Rock and Roll Express were in there. Lex Luger was in there. And of course the Road Warriors were in there. Now, and I had a couple programs, and I actually managed to get Lex Luger to sign one. I got Dr. Death to sign one, and I got both Road Warriors. So and they're both scribbles. They're all, and they're with just a pen. So it's really scribbly, but I mean, you could kind of I looked at Hawk and Animal, and they both just kind of looked like they wanted to be somewhere else. They both didn't really seem to be really interested in being amongst that crowd. And I know they were in the main event that night, which I never thought they'd ever get to because it was like almost midnight until they finally pulled this out. And it was supposed to be, and it was like a scaffold match. Okay. So, because they were doing the scaffold match with like the Koloffs and a couple of other teams. And I forget who the original opponents were supposed to be, but for whatever reason, they wound up pulling like two jobber people. I don't even know who they were. I can't even remember their names. Well, this match was over in like a minute or two. It was like a ripoff. You
wow.
thought you were going to get this great main event, and instead you just get this squash match where they just literally, I mean, boom, boom, off they went, and that was it. So it wasn't even all that exciting of a thing. But I mean, I don't remember much else about the evening. It was just, I know they did, I think they did some tapings, or I don't know what else. Anyway, long time ago. But I thought they'd never get to the main event. But I was a little disappointed with that by the end of it. But it was still, I still got to meet the Road Warriors, and I still got to see Dr. Death and Lex Luger. 3 of the 4 are gone. They're not with us anymore now. So I'm hanging on to those programs.
Oh, yeah.
but that was sad when WWE did that one thing where, Hawk's climbing up the
Oh my God, yeah.
Titantron, and then it looked like they pushed him off. That was, that whole thing where they made that come to life. The real problems would come into life. I was like, even back then, I was like, this is not a good idea. It was
Exactly.
terrible, 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 terrible thing. And then, of course, the Road Warriors, then they wind up leaving, I believe. And then of course Hawk passes away from a heart condition.
Yes.
And then, we of course we all know what happens to Droz because he gets pulled in as a Road Warrior too,
Mhm.
and we all know what happened to him. And then of course recently we lost Animal, not too long ago after that episode aired, and I don't think Paul Ellering expected to outlive both of those guys. But it was a cool story talking, he's seeing Paul Ellering tell that story about pulling the sheet off that old van that he
Mhm.
still had from when he took that first tour with those guys.
Mhm.
Of course, they can't go faster than 55 miles an hour, but he drove it and he got to the thing. And boy, what a story. I'd like to see a later thing, him talking about what him and Animals thing. And but That was a good one. That one tugged at the heartstrings a little bit, but you know, yeah. So the Road Warriors, that was a good one. So
Absolutely. And the thing is, if you didn't really live during that time, you don't realize how huge the Warriors were. They would probably for about a 8 to 10 years stretch were huge. They were larger than life.
yeah,
By the time they came to WWE, they were kind of at the end of their prime. And the way they marketed them at the beginning with the orange, the orange pads and the rubber spikes, it
yeah,
just wasn't quite the same. Although they could still go and they were still doing all the same great double team moves in that,
yeah.
but in the AWA and the NWA, they made them look like monsters. They had
Oh gosh, yeah.
fantastic guys, fantastic teachers, fantastic workers around them
You know,
too.
one of the only teams to win tag belts in AWA, WWE, NWA, Japan,
Yep.
probably. You know,
Yes.
you don't. There's not many teams that can say that. You know,
Right.
maybe now with all these little indie things running around,
Right.
but I mean, those major federations and they could not a lot of teams could say that back then.
That's true. And Paul Ellering was a legit manager.
He
He
was.
wasn't just a mouthpiece. He actually did all of their travel
Yeah.
accommodations, all of that stuff. He
All
was
the
a
booking.
legitimate
Yeah.
manager. All the
Yeah.
booking. That was all Paul. It was a mastermind
You
who
know,
would have had a great career himself until a horrible knee injury ended it.
yeah.
Um, but oh yeah,
What
what a story.
I got to talk about one memory of the Road Warriors that will always stick in my head
Yeah.
when they turned on Dusty Rhodes. You
Oh,
remember he pulled that
yeah.
spike out
Oh my
and
gosh, yeah.
almost was trying to spike his eye out. You know, oh my gosh,
Same.
that was insane. I mean, ooh.
Yeah,
But you know, it made them the beasts that they were. You know, for them turning on him like that. But wow,
absolutely.
woo, that was intense.
It was intense. It also shows you how selfless Dusty was because he was the victim of it all and he
Mm-hmm.
booked the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
You can say partly selfless, but part of it was he was still going to be over like Rover when he came back.
Oh
But
yeah,
he came up with that idea. The
yeah,
guy was a genius.
yeah.
Some of the stuff he came up with.
Yep.
Wow.
Road Warriors, may you rest in peace.
Yes. Rest in peace. And rest in peace, Darren Drozdov, too, who we just
Yes,
lost recently
yes,
as well.
yes.
Mm. What
Absolutely.
talents. Absolutely. So my next one is going to be the assassination of Dino Bravo. Um, Now Dino Bravo, this was a very educational one for me because I knew about the good guy Dino Bravo in Canada only from magazines. I didn't know he owned his own territory until I watched it. I remember the Dino Bravo that had the bleach blonde hair and was a great shit kicking, ass kicking heel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, who was they were putting him over everybody there for a little stretch there in the late 80s.
Yeah.
I also knew about how we lost Dino Bravo as well, but this was very well done in the fact that it really everybody here told a story well. You
Yeah.
had Tony Moulet, who was his next door neighbor and was a good friend, a very good friend of Dino Bravo's, and was very well involved in the business. You had Gino Brito, who was a legend in Canadian wrestling, and he was
Yep.
his tag team partner. You had Dino's wife and daughter, who were excellent on here. They really told this was a sad story to watch, and
It was.
it was hard to watch because you saw the family man Dino Bravo and how he was totally different, and you hear that about a lot of these guys. You can hear more about this as we go on. How a lot of these we're all human beings, we all got families, and Dino was at his heart was a great family man. But he played this dastardly heel in the WWE in the late 80s, and was making money hand over fist in the early to mid 80s when he controlled wrestling in Montreal. To the point where they wanted to bring Hulk Hogan in to fight him, but it wasn't going to work because Dino was over in Montreal.
Yeah.
So they weren't going to put those two together at that point. But this is it focuses a lot on his career, but it also focuses on his demise, his murder for smuggling cigarettes in the Canadian mafia, which was unbeknownst to nearly everyone who was involved in this episode until he was shot. And the way he was shot was something out of a gangster movie, and I mean, it was real. It was real life. I thought this was very well done. I think this is one of the best episodes of the season. If it was nice to see something focused on a show focused on someone that he was a star but not a superstar over in Canada, but over here in the States he was a talent, but he was a great heel, but he wasn't the tippy top guy. Oh, right. Jacques Rougeau was fantastic.
Oh, he was. Yeah, he was.
I can listen to, I would love to just pull up a chair and just talk wrestling with Jacques Rougeau for a few hours. He was spectacular. But they really went into what was going on in wrestling at that point. How Vince McMahon and his quest for domination of a monopoly, if you will, in wrestling was getting all the great talents from all the great territories. And they got Bravo. And they were begging Bravo, please don't leave because they're going to come and get us now. But they got Bravo, and then they got King Tonga, Haku. And then they got the Rougeau brothers. They were taking all the great talent to make the WWE bigger. And what happened is it bankrupted
international wrestling. Yeah.
International wrestling. So if you think about it, if you think about where Stu Hart's territory, look who they got there. You got Hart, you got Brett, you got Jim Neidhart, you got the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, you got Dynamite Kid. I mean, so many. Oh, Rick Martel. Rick Martel was a huge star in Montreal. I'm kind of going back and forth between provinces in Canada, right. But Rick Martel was a huge star in the WWE, but he originally made his name in Canada before he went to WWE and then AWA, etc. But this was there was a lot of depth to this episode in how things work behind the scenes, but also Dino's life as well. And his wife and daughter came off really strong here. They told a great story, and some of the things that they said kind of make your heart break. I mean,
oh yeah,
when Dino showed his daughter, who was then 4, a red car in a garage, he goes, "This will be your car one day." You couldn't help but get choked up when you saw that, because you always hear stories about that as you're growing up with some of your friends and all that. But very, very good episode. This is one I can watch over and over and not get bored of it. The assassination of Dino Bravo. Rest in peace, Dino Bravo.
Yeah. See, I remember Dino from the way old WWF days. You know, because he tagged with Dominic DeNucci for a while, and they were actually tag champs. You know, this was in the late 70s. So, you know, I remember like his big thing was the airplane spin.
Yes.
That was his finisher thing. And then and then he left for a while, and of course he was up in Canada, and he came back with, like you said, with the the bleach blonde hair, and and just this totally different character. That was just the weirdest thing for me to watch at first, but I always had that love for the old Dino Bravo. But by the time he retired, it just sounded like he didn't have a plan B.
Yes, that's true.
He didn't have a plan B in life. And, if he had a better plan B, maybe we wouldn't be talking about him like this right now.
Yeah.
He would
That's
have had,
true.
he would have been able to go on to enjoy life and be around his grandkids that his daughter talks about, and stuff like that. And boy, that was yeah, that was that kind of stuff does pull at the heartstrings. It's probably a shame. I don't think he's in the WWE Hall of Fame.
No.
And I have a feeling because of how he died, he probably will never be in the WWE Hall of Fame. Um, but yeah, that's it was a very sad but cautionary story. And I couldn't help but think those, like his next door neighbor and one of those other guys, the Gino, the Burrito, didn't those guys look like they could have been in the mafia?
Tony Mullet definitely did. Oh my gosh. Because he dressed the part.
He dressed the part to a T.
And Gino seems
He's just
really
an older
serious.
guy.
He's an older guy, but he was really serious.
Yeah.
He,
Yeah.
it, when he the way he was talking, you're like, he was very matter of fact. The way he was telling the stories and all that, you're like, he seems like someone you don't want to cross, you know.
Mm-mm.
But they said
Mm-mm.
that about Dino too. Like Dino was very well. The fact that he was very slow to trust people, but once he was your friend, he was your friend for life. He had you. He had your
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
You know.
But it's a shame that the case has never been solved.
Right.
So anybody who watches this and you have any information, go back on that episode, look up the tip line, help Dino's family out, and
Absolutely.
try to bring the people that did that thing to justice. And like you say, rest in peace, Dino Bravo. So now let's just go way over the top. Let's talk about New Jack.
Oh yeah.
Oh, New Jack. Oh boy. Ray Candy told him, you gotta be something you've never seen before.
That's right.
And as he puts it, I won't go into the language that he uses, but boy, that messed him up when thinking about that. And boy, did he bring something. Yeah, maybe he couldn't wrestle to save his soul, but boy, he could do the hardcore stuff like nobody's business. You put him on a mic, just like you don't ask Iron Sheik for heat.
Mhm.
You don't ask, you don't do this, you don't do that with New Jack, and you also don't ask New Jack to get you colored. Especially if you think you're this like super mark wrestling guy and think you can just bully your way around the locker room. Yeah, he's going to teach you a lesson real quickly. Sandman was hilarious in this episode.
Oh my God, yeah.
Um, he's like, oh, so that's what ticked him off. Oh, okay, that makes sense now. But yeah, I mean, talking to New Jack about the Smoky Mountain days, and just how they were able to rile up those people in the South back then. Of
Mhm.
course, by that point they did everything they could, and then here comes ECW, perfect playground for those guys, with all the stuff they would bring into the ring. And of course, you got natural born killers playing almost the entire time through their matches. Of course, kids, you're not going to hear that on WWE Network. You're going to hear some other goofy music now, or the DVDs or Blu-rays. You're not going to hear the natural born killers version anymore. You only if you have the pay-per-views as they were happening.
Right.
WWE wasn't going to touch them, not with a 10-foot pole, not even with a 12-foot pole. You know, he did a little bit in TNA, but again, mostly just hardcore stuff. Then you get this, you get the Engine Joe,
Was it Gypsy Joe?
Gypsy Joe,
Yeah.
excuse me, not Gypsy Joe. I got nothing for that. I mean, that was horrific. And
Let me
then
before you go on, John, did you know about that before you watched this episode? Because I didn't.
I heard stories.
Okay.
I did hear stories about that one.
Okay.
Now that other guy, was it not Amazing Red, but I
Right.
forgot the guy's
I,
something Red. But anyway,
right. Thunder Red or
Thunder Red, maybe that's what it was. and he's like literally stabbing this guy. What?
Yeah.
And he's like, and then you know, if you thought Herb Abram had balls thinking he was going to take on the wrestling world, then here comes this Thunder Ed guy or whatever his name was. I forget his name. Here he comes with his own set of kuyans and say, hey, I'll drop the charges. You know, hey, let's have some let's do a revenge angle that we can do the tour like in small promotions.
Wow.
How dumb can you be? How dumb can you be? You're not New Jack's not gonna fall. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, we'll do that. Yeah. He never saw him again in his life after that.
Nope.
But you know, but by that point, New Jack shouldn't probably have been wrestling anymore anyway, because really, after what happened with him and
Joe.
no, not with Joe.
Mass Transit.
No, the guy he tried to kill in XPW. When they took that bad bump in ECW and the guy did
Vic Grimes.
Vic Grimes, thank you.
Yep.
I knew there's something with Vic and Victory or something. Vic Grimes. When he took that, when Vic wouldn't do that turn that thing right to where they could have landed properly, and New Jack, God, how he didn't die from that thing, I don't know. But I mean, when he tried to almost literally kill Vic Grimes, you know, after that incident in XPW when he tased him, and then he threw him off that scaffold through the, you know, barely, you know, he said, I tried to throw him over a little harder. I didn't quite get him over as hard as I wanted to, and he got through the tables, you know, and Grimes only got away with like a dislocated ankle after that. He's lucky. He's fortunate that that's all that happened to him in that match. God, yeah. But I mean, my gosh, the mass transit. When I first heard about this is like before I heard, you know, before the ECW, the rise and fall of ECW and that one night stand thing. I actually saw a clip of this. Somebody had me at their house, and they were actually able to dig this thing up, and I'm watching this thing. I'm like, oh.
Wow.
You know, you get these close-ups of this blood literally like out of this guy's head. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, how did ECW not get shut down because of it? You know, I heard about this, that there was some stuff maybe that barely legal wasn't going to happen, but that was just ridiculous. And, you know, again, you know, you imagine if Herb Abrams and New Jack had gotten together.
Oh my gosh.
How much coke would have been done?
Holy crap. Wow.
All I can say is rest in peace, New Jack.
Rest in peace, New Jack.
Rest in power, whatever you want to do with in your gangsta's paradise or whatever, but rest somewhere. But good Lord, that was ridiculous.
When you were watching this originally, this was before we met. Mm-hmm. Were you getting, when he said, "Yeah, I'm just gonna be sitting there in a wheelchair doing some coke"? Did you wonder at that point how much longer we could have Jack? I mean, I
did kind of wonder, at least, because I knew there were so many injuries he'd had that obviously he was never going to recover really from, you know, as he talked about in that episode. But I always kind of wondered, because most of those hardcore guys haven't had a whole lot of longevity, you know, as far as life. And I mean, some of them weren't even like the really hardcore guys, you know, like Chris Candido or Spicoli, or, you know, obviously the Public Enemy guys had the hardcore stuff. But you know, let me think, who else?
Well, you had Balls Mahoney.
Mahoney. Not one half of the Eliminators, not the one that went to WWE, but the other, Cronus. Yeah, Cronus. Of course,
Myers.
Yeah, Hack Myers. You know, there's a lot of those guys that aren't with us Big Dick Dudley.
Oh yeah,
He's gone. So there's a lot of those guys that aren't with us anymore, you know. But I don't know.
yeah. The thing about ECW is just there's another thing. The Attitude Era in WWE, where do you think they got it?
Oh, they had to. They
They
had to
had
get that
to.
from all the crazy stuff that ACW was pulling off.
That
I
was
mean,
that was
I
the
mean,
find of
granted,
Paul Heyman.
yeah, you're not going to see a swinging scaffold match in WWE.
Right.
Not like the way they did it in ECW, especially in the ECW arena with that thing swinging back and forth. I don't know if you ever
Oh
saw
my
that
God.
match with
I never saw that one.
Tommy Dreamer and Primetime by Brian Lee.
Okay.
Swinging scaffold match in the mat, and with this, and they're on the top of this. Of course, the first they're fighting all around the ring and all around the arena before they finally get up on the scaffold. And of course, the ring is loaded with tables, and I had a videotape. It's actually on a DVD or a Blu-ray of something of WWE they did with ECW. I don't remember which one, but I had a videotape that I got from like the ECW site at the time in like 1997 or whatever it was, and that match was on this. I'm just like, what? It's just hearing Joey Styles going,
Yeah.
just at the end of the match. It's just, oh gosh, just ridiculous. But yeah, uh, it was intense. It was definitely intense.
Yeah. I watched ECW. First apartment I had, you go out and hit the bars, then you come home at 2 o'clock in the morning on Sports Channel on Saturday morning.
Mm-hmm.
They'd have ECW on. That's how I got into ECW. So that's how I discovered all these guys.
Yeah.
So that's when I saw Mustafa Saeed or Colonel Mustafa. Wait, is it Mustafa Saeed?
Mustafa Saeed, yeah.
All
Colonel
right, thank
Mustafa
you.
was what the Iron Sheik became.
Yeah. With so you had him and New Jack. You had the Gangsters. You had the Eliminators. You had the Dudleys. Devon bring the tables. That was way before
Oh,
WWE.
way before.
Way before that.
And man, that family tree was all over the place.
Oh my God, Sign Guy,
Sign Guy
Spike.
Dudley, Spike, and uh
There's another
there
one.
there was like two or three others, like
Wasn't there Dances with Dudley?
Dances with Dudley. Of course, I mentioned Big Dick Dudley.
Dick Dudley.
Boy, yeah, I think there's like one or two others I can't remember off the top of my head,
Right.
but oh gosh.
Yeah, those characters but amidst all these characters and all this hardcore wrestling, you'd have Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko put on this clinic for like 30 minutes. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, I mean, you had the craziest stuff you ever see, and you'd probably had the best technical wrestling you'd ever see on the same card.
Rey Mysterio and Psychosis. Or Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, or Dean
Exactly.
Malenko and Rey Mysterio, any of those guys. Yeah, then you have this stuff that was just out of this world, great stuff that you just weren't getting at that point. And then WCW steals all of them, but
Right. Or WWE, it depended.
or WWE, yeah, because most of the luchadors went to WWE or went to WCW.
That's true.
So but there you go. Rest in peace, New Jack.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay. Well, we grew up in Pennsylvania in the 1980s.
Yep.
So there's no way in the world we're not going to talk about the Superfly Jimmy Snuka.
We got to.
Now, like I was saying before about the Warriors, you had to be there. You had to live it. And he was even over more so.
Mm-hmm.
He was
huge.
As a heel under Lou Albano, he was over like Rover. He was the fans loved him. He was the first bad guy I really saw get tons of cheers.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't talk because Lou Albano wouldn't let him.
Right.
And it was all because of his athleticism and the super fly splash off the top rope, which was ahead of its time.
Mm-hmm.
And every time he hit that, guy get carted out of the arena, and Snuka just and making those faces, and he had that long hair, and he had the incredible body.
Yeah.
He
Oh,
was just
he was jacked.
ripped.
Oh
And at that point,
gosh.
he was in his late 30s. And he
Yeah.
was that ripped.
Yeah.
But during this time, he was so over. He fought Bob Backlund in the cage at the Garden, and they were all back. They all want Backlund to lose because Backlund had been champ for a little while, and the fans were getting a little sick of Bob Backlund. Bob Backlund, and by the way, wonderful wrestler, wonderful guy.
I love Bob Backlund. Love him to death.
Me too. Oh god, especially heel Bob Backlund.
Oh,
My
heel Bob Backlund was hilarious.
he was fantastic. But Snuka was so over. I mean, he didn't need the title. I mean, you saw the feuds he was in at that time. When you watch this episode, it's heavily, you get a lot of Don Morocco on here. Don Morocco was feuding with Snuka, and what a feud. That was fantastic.
Oh, that
Morocco was such a dastardly heel.
The beach bum.
The beach bum. The originator of the tombstone before they gave it the tombstone pile driver name.
That's right.
He called it the Hawaiian hammer.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was fantastic. The Tonga kid, Sam Fatu, who was only 17 then, but he looked like a little Snuka.
He did.
He was great on this.
Yeah.
You had Nancy Angelino's
Argentino.
I think it's Argelino. I think we're mixed
Argentino.
Argentino. Okay, thank you. All right. Angelino, what am I talking? Three's Company? Mr. Angelino, Jack's boss? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Argentino. I was apologizing to anybody would be watching or listening to. So Argentino. Anyway, both of her sisters were outstanding on this episode. I'm telling you about Nancy and who she was and how they warned her about Jimmy. Because Jimmy, for all of his athletic talent, he had a few screws loose. And I might be understating it. And he loved the party too. When he became a babyface, Buddy Rogers was his manager, but he was actually more of his handler because Snuka needed a handler.
Yeah.
And eventually Buddy said, I can't deal with this anymore. And I think it may have been around this time when Nancy was murdered. At the time when we were fans, we didn't hear about this stuff. You didn't hear about it on television. And I lived farther north than John did of that area. Yeah. Like, I think that happened around Allentown.
Happened in my backyard, literally. Yeah.
Yeah. So you didn't hear that in the local papers here up in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. But it was interesting how you slowly saw Snuka getting phased out to the point where by WrestleMania 1, which was in March 85, this guy who was the top baby face when Backlund was champ and was probably still the second top baby face, either him or Slaughter when Hogan was champ, was now just in the corner of Mr. T and Hogan when they fought Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper in the main event WrestleMania 1. So something was going. They obviously knew something. Vince McMahon and everyone there knew what was going on, definitely, because he was really going down the card at a rapid pace, even though he wasn't losing matches. He wasn't putting guys over.
Yeah.
But this kind of got swept under the rug because they gave Nancy's parents a $500,000 settlement.
I think originally what I remember hearing in the show was like, I think they were going to offer him like $25,000.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was like $25,000. And they're like, for my sister's life or for my daughter's life? Are you kidding me? You know, and I think they turned it, they turned that away. But yeah, that did make newspapers in the morning call for us, and
Yeah.
for me living in the Lehigh Valley, because you know George Washington Motor Lodge, I remember that building plain as day. It's not there anymore. It's I think it's a Lowe's now, but I remember if you're going down if you're going into Allentown coming out of Whitehall Township and you're taking it's called MacArthur Road, and you take that MacArthur Road eventually turns into 7th Street. So right about at the end of MacArthur Road and 7th Street, where it turns into 7th Street, was where it was right around the Route 22 exits. And so and that's where the George Washington Motor Lodge was. And so I've never in those buildings. Obviously, why would I need to stay there? Because I live there. So, but I never got in there. But I can remember those buildings just as plain as day. So when they were showing those pictures, I was like, wow, yep, I remember those days. But long gone. I forget when they tore it down, and now it's a Lowe's, but or something like that now. But yeah, Buddy Rogers just couldn't handle him anymore. uh Jimmy was living 2 separate lives.
Right.
That was the other thing too, is he was still married, and when he was with Nancy.
Yes.
So that should have been a red flag to Nancy, but for whatever reason she kept going. um you know this doesn't, when you talked about it being swept under the rug, it just doesn't make Vince look good.
No.
It really made him look pretty bad in a lot of people's eyes, if he's wanting to just sweep this under the, because I think he kind of wanted to do the same thing with Owen and Martha,
Oh,
after
no
Owen
question.
passed away. I think they were trying to sweep that under the rug. And Martha was wanting justice, but I'm going to leave that subject for another time, because that we could spend all day talking about Owen Hart. But
Yes.
again, what kind of person are you to just sweep these kind of things under the rug without a proper investigation? It just didn't even sound like there was a really good investigation going on here. There were stories that the Tonga kid was riding in the car with them, and when Nancy hit her head, which Tonga kid doesn't seem to really recall that. Autopsy covers up. By the time Snuka goes to trial, he's in no condition to be under trial. He's between stomach cancer and dementia. What good is he? He's not going to be. He's not going to be able to do anything on the stand. And unfortunately, then he passes away. So whatever he knew and whatever secrets he knew, whether you want to believe what was in his book or not, which I've never read, he took that to the grave with him. Who knows?
Yeah. This didn't get revisited either until like 30 years after the fact.
Yeah.
I'm glad it was revisited, because, how many millions of people wouldn't have even known about it if it wasn't revisited?
No, it sparked such an interest in that story, which again, the timing of Snuka's book was probably not really a good idea, because apparently he goes into that in some detail, but again, whether what you want to believe out of that is another story. But I don't know. But it's another sad story. But again, it's like so many characters, and so many people. We talk about New Jack and all the stuff that he did in the ring. Well, maybe that was pretty much who knew where New Jack stopped and Jerome Young picked up.
Right.
Chris Benoit. We could spend an hour talking about Chris Benoit from this season. As much as I love Chris Benoit the wrestler, Chris Benoit the person, with what happened, that's hard to separate. Jimmy Snuka the person, you can't really separate what happened with him and Nancy and all the other stuff that went on. But Jimmy Snuka the wrestler, who is ever going to forget him climbing up to the top of that cage and splashing Don Morocco. Who's going to forget that image? I'm not. And I'm sure for the thousands of people that were in Madison Square Garden that night, they ain't going to forget it either. Who's another good case of somebody that, Dino Bravo, as we talked about. It's just, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. Even if we went into the Brawl for All, we could talk about JBL and why that thing got started, because JBL was this big bully. Well, maybe JBL as a person is not so much of a, I never really liked the JBL character personally anyway, so it didn't hurt my feelings to see him getting beat up in the ring too. But, is JBL that much of an arrogant person outside the ring? I don't know. That's, that's for people who know JBL well. So sometimes that fine line of trying to separate the character from the person is very, very difficult.
Yes.
So, but yeah, that was again, rest in peace, Nancy Argentino, and rest in peace, Jimmy Snuka. I think everybody that we talked about in this one, everybody passed away. All the main focal points of these shows, everybody passed away. Herb Abrams, Dino, Snuka, Road Warriors, New Jack, they've all gone from us. And
all the best to Lorraine and Louise too, the surviving sisters of Nancy Argentino.
Yes.
I mean, to have to go and relive this again in this documentary, they agreed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That had to be difficult.
It had to be.
Much respect to them, and much respect to Jimmy Snuka's last wife, who was on there,
mm-hmm.
who didn't know. I think they married long after all this happened, and she's still with us.
Yeah.
I hope she is well also. But wow.
Yeah. So there you go, guys. We didn't talk about some of the episodes. We could have easily talked about Benoit. We could easily talk about Owen Hart. We could talk about the Brawl for All. We could probably have talked about the Dr. David Schultz. And you know what? I'm just gonna say this one off the fly. How about next week? Because I know, John, you wanted to talk about Dr. David Schultz a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Let's spend some time with the rest of the episodes next week. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
I think we need to do, because I wouldn't mind talking about the Dr. D and and Brawl for All and stuff like that. Those episodes were just too good to pass up.
Yeah.
Let's do that. We didn't discuss this before air, so there you go. No. All that stuff was just way too good to pass up. So
yeah,
so
season of riches, this one.
Yeah, this was a really good this was a good season. This was a strong season. So so there you go. So next week we're going to spend some time talking about those other episodes in that season, some of the heavy hitters, the big heavy hitters. So John, what you got going on that we need to be looking out for coming up?
Okay, when this show airs, Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, August 2nd, I will also be live on Grant's Rock Warehouse talking about our favorite 10 tracks from 1974. So that will be Byron Bolt, Ernesto Ramos, Grant Arthur, Daryl Collins, also known as DC Toontime, and myself. So we'll be talking 1974 live this Wednesday at 8 p.m. The following night, same time on Grant's Rock Warehouse, John and I will be joining Grant to discuss the second live album by the Motor City Madman Ted Nugent, called Intensities in 10 Cities. That's going to be fun.
That's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to listen. I got to listen to it a few more times, but yeah, that's going to be a fun episode.
Best live album of songs written in 20 minutes you'll ever hear. That's
pretty much.
Yeah, so that's what I got coming up. I don't think I have anything on Friday. And then next week we'll get in the week next week. I'll get into that next week. John, what else you got going on?
Well, let's see. I've got we just had the from Peter Kerr's Rock Daydream Nation
Oh
of
yeah.
bands that should have been bigger. That one just dropped Saturday. So that one's out for you all to check out. A great show. I was living up to my Johnny Metal nickname, so I stuck to mostly metal stuff, and
Hey,
John here brought a little bit of everything, and as did Peter. I was happy to see Peter bring in Raven, though. That was nice. I was like, yes, that would have been one of my other choices. So so we talked about some great bands there that really should have gotten more recognition. Let's see. I just recorded we recorded a In Defense of Raven's Pack is Back album with Peter Kerr and Peter Wicks. So that show we have two Peters and a John. So there you go. But we defend the Pack is Back album, which is which I've gained a lot of respect for. I really dug deeper into it. I've really enjoyed it. And that's pretty much all I got coming up. I think other than the intensities, intense cities, I think there's a I think I might be on. I think if my schedule works out, I'm going to probably be doing another one with Peter, talking about Alice Cooper's From the Inside.
oh yeah, I'm on that too.
Okay, so I think that's going to work out to where I'll be on that. So I'm still kind of mulling some things there. So we'll see. But I'm hoping to get on that one because I love that album too. So, but that's pretty much all that I've got lined up. Trying to get my North and South rock and metal connection, guys. A lot of life and schedules have kind of changed up for us all, so it's been a little challenging getting back together and getting something to talk about. And we're hoping one of these days we'll get to do a little crossover and bring John the Music Nut here and we'll have some fun with those guys. So
That's right.
that should be a lot of fun. So there you go. Dark Side of the Ring season 2 part 1. We're going to do part 2 next week because it's just too good to pass up. We got to do it. So for John the Music Nut, my faithful co-captain on this Wednesday series that we've been doing, when we talk about wrestling, it's going to be the 5 count. Rest in peace, King Kong Bundy, for it. Johnny Metal, John Clauser, the Metal Dad. And we'll see you next week when we talk Dark Side of the Ring season 2 part 2. We'll see you soon.
Keep screaming down the house.
Yes.